Radio 97, it's time to learn a couple of things. Our resident lawyer, Despina Priala of boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay, with us each and every Thursday. She brings all of her many years of legal expertise and provides some general advice on the latest hot topics. She has experience that spans, well, now it's 26 years, more than 26 years in the area of property and commercial law. And she also prepares wills as part of estate planning and litigation. Morning to you, Despina.
Good morning, Wayne. Good morning, Brooke.
Good morning, Desi. Now, we're starting off. We actually have two massive topics to talk about, but we'll kick off with this one. That's a High Court case, which we love to discuss because there's a big outcome for this one in Victoria that may affect the rest of Australia. Despina, what's the update out of Vic?
Okay, so very exciting historical case. So we love High Court cases. This is a recent case only determined on the 18th of October, so only 2.5 weeks ago, pretty much. And the interesting part about it, well, there's lots of interesting things about it, but it was decided on a 4-3 majority. So it's very, very close. And it's a very important case for lots of people in Australia. So let's talk about it a bit. So in Victoria in 2021, there was a state act that was passed, and it's a long name. So I'll give you the name of it. So it was called the Zero and Low Emission Vehicle Distance-Based Charge Act of 2021.
Wow. Oh, yeah, I know the one.
You know the one.
Yeah.
You know one. Yeah, the abbreviated is the ZLEV Charge Act. So that was the act that was passed. So what the act was doing in Victoria for the last 2 years, 21 to 23, it was an act that allowed the state to impose a tax on those people who owned vehicles with zero or low emissions. So electric,
Your Teslas, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's right. Now, there was a particular couple that took this particular act, or the state government, to task. They went all the way to the High Court, and the High Court ruled that that particular act that the Victorian government passed was actually classed as invalid. So it no longer applies. So there's lots of interesting, important things that will come out of this case that will affect everybody. Okay, really, really important. Not just if you own an electric vehicle. It's not just about that. What I'm going to explain this morning is it actually opens up the floodgates potentially for other areas in relation to tax. So you want to keep listening into this. So it's not about whether you own or don't own an electric vehicle, but that is part of it. So what it did is it said, okay, this act's invalid. And why was it classed as an invalid act? Because the High Court said that the particular tax that this act was trying to impose, or did impose on people for 2 years in Victoria, was unconstitutional. And why was it unconstitutional? So it was classed as unconstitutional and invalid under Section 90 of the Constitution, because what the High Court said is that this particular act was imposing an excise, not a duty. So an excise, and if a state government imposes an excise, right, that is actually deemed unconstitutional and invalid under Section 90 of the Constitution, because only the Commonwealth and not the state can impose an excise. So I know that's a lot to take on, but essentially in a nutshell, only Commonwealth and the Commonwealth powers can actually impose an excise, right, not state. So that's really, really important. That's always been in the Constitution. So now that the High Court said, okay, well, this act's invalid because it had this impact and effect. So not only all those people for 2 years who did pay that tax, not only can they now apply for a refund, happy days, right? So, yeah, great. There's other effects and results of this particular case. So the other result or outcome is no other state or territory can now do the same thing. So you can't have New South Wales, you can't have Queensland or any other state imposing a similar act, doing a similar thing, because now the High Court has said, well, you can't do that. It's invalid. It's unconstitutional, right? So that's already cleared that out. But the other big impact, and this is what I want to get to, is really interesting, because what people are saying out there, and when I say people who are constitutional experts in the legal industry are saying that this particular case has a much bigger and larger impact on the everyday Australian. And what they're talking about is, well, if this act now says that that particular duty that they were trying to impose in Victoria on this low and zero emission vehicles, if that was classed as an excise and it's invalid, what if other state taxes can now be classed as invalid? For example, payroll tax, right?
Well, that's
so
a big one. Yep.
It's a big one. So I know any business owner or company I talk to hates the fact that they pay payroll tax. And look, there's obviously arguments for and against. I don't really know what the argument for is, but most people say, well, why do I pay payroll tax? What is it for and what does it do? And it's just another tax that business owners, certain business owners, not everybody has to pay payroll tax, but certain business owners who are over a particular threshold have to pay payroll tax. Now, what if the floodgates have opened and this case now has the potential for people to now go to their accountant, who will then go to the ATO and say, you know what, I don't think that I should be paying payroll tax because I think now it's actually an excise, not a duty, and therefore it's invalid under Section 90 of the Constitution. And that's a pretty big deal. So this is what a lot of people are now talking about in the industry. So it has opened up the floodgates, and it's there that the potential for that, since this case was determined, is now there. And really, I think if you were someone that has been paying payroll tax for several years, I think at the very least, what you should be doing is going to your accountant. And your accountant, when you talk to them, look, this may be outside their realm of what they normally do. You might have to go to a tax expert. So, but at the very least, what you should be doing is going to your accountant and saying, hey, there's a recent High Court case I heard on the radio. It's pretty important, and it might open up the door for us to now apply that we shouldn't be paying payroll tax.
So this, of course, is another state tax. There are a number of different state taxes, things like stamp duties and things like that. Is there any chance that a whole broad range of state taxes could be under review, under question here?
Well, potentially. So what it actually does is it raises questions about the efficacy of state and territory laws seeking to impose a tax. That's what it has done. That definitely this decision has done that. So now people are starting to look at, well, what is the efficacy of certain states and territories that have already and have done for some time past laws that impose duties? Is it an excise or is it not? Okay, and it's a very technical legal argument. And it comes down to direct and indirect economic benefits. So it's too technical for today, and I'm not a constitutional expert or a tax expert. But what I wanted to do was mention this case because not many people would be aware of it, right? The ATO is obviously going to keep a very low lid on this as well. Right. Yeah. So they're not going to issue a publication to everybody about, hey, you should be aware. They're not going to do that. I'd be surprised if they did. But certainly what we're here today is to tell people this is a big, big decision. You need to go and see your accountant, have a discussion. Now, if the accountant says, oh, forget that, that's just ridiculous, I would not be accepting that. I'd be saying, look, at the very least, we need to explore it, right? And explore it with the right consultant, the right expert for you. Because if it's the case that this is found to be a tax that really is invalid under Section 90 of the Constitution, well, happy days. But, you know, there's going to be, between then and now, if that is the outcome, and I'm not saying it would be, there's a lot of hoops to get through. But certainly this is the first step. So very interesting case that I wanted to bring to the attention of the listeners out there.
I remember many years ago, Paul Keating, ex-Prime Minister, said that you should never stand between a state premier and a bucket of money. So I think there'll be a number of premiers who could be crying some tears very soon by the sounds of it.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say this, that it's not going to happen overnight if there is going to be further change, because you can imagine that, say, for example, payroll tax is overturned. That's going to have a massive, substantial shift in the fiscal balance. I like that word, the fiscal balance, you know, across Australia. That's going to have a massive shift. So that just doesn't happen overnight. But certainly we're talking about it. So that's the first step.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Despina. And coming up next, another big topic. What is animal dander and why is it affecting people moving into their dream unit? Stay tuned. That's coming up on Radio 97.
Are you confused about legal jargon? Do you need legal advice but don't know where to turn? Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97. Despina, a leading lawyer with over 20 years of experience, will demystify the law and provide practical advice to help you navigate legal issues. Whether it's a family matter, a property dispute, or a business concern, Talking Law has got you covered. Don't miss out on this valuable resource. Tune in to Talking Law with Despina Priala every Thursday morning at 8:30 on Radio 97.